All right, guys. Happy Sunday morning. I hope it is happy for you. Hopefully nobody's hung over this morning. That's the disadvantage about doing a live show on a Sunday morning. Everybody's hung over and probably not even listening. Hopefully that's not the case. Anyway, what happened here up in New England? We got a dousing of snow last night, the first significant snowfall of the season. We had like light flurries about a month ago, didn't amount to anything, and it's been unusually freaky warm ever since. In fact, Thursday, it was in the 70s, low 70s. I couldn't believe it. I was out on my bike, didn't even need a jacket. It felt like springtime. And now here it is. We've got, probably, an inch and a half of snow out on the ground, and I suppose it's pretty to look at, but I can't stand the stuff. All right, that's it. We don't need any more now for the rest of the winter. We're all set. I guess it's nice to have a white Christmas, but I can't stand the stuff. I can't believe I used to love this stuff as a kid. I despise it. Anyway, hopefully the weather is nicer where you're at. But after all, it is winter time. It's got to come sooner or later. It just stinks. It's not even technically winter yet. We're still, another 3 weeks away or so from or 2 weeks, I guess, away from official first day of winter, which is, the 20th, 21st, whatever the heck. Anyway, guys, got a important show lined up for today, covering a couple, or at least, one important topic. If I have enough time, I might do 2 topics today. We'll see how it goes. But next week, I'm hoping, I don't know if I want to tell you who my proposed guest is yet, because first of all, I don't even know if he's going to be able to make it next week. Second of all, I don't know if I want to keep it a surprise or not, but, let's just say you won't be disappointed. So tune in next week, and if he makes it on, it's going to be a heck of a good show. And even if he doesn't, it's going to be a heck of a good show anyway. Wishful thinking on my part. Anyway, today one of the topics I'm definitely going to be covering is the ADD, ADHD fraud. You've got millions of kids around the country, more tan a third that are on psychotropic meds, primarily because of the ADD, ADHD diagnosis, which is literally invented by the pharmaceutical companies as an excuse to get kids on these drugs so they can make big fat profits. But incredibly, it's not just about money, folks. It's not just about profits. Oh, they're making a lot of money, a lot of profits off of this scam. But what's going on here involves, again, much more than just money making. We're dealing with a very sinister, tyrannical agenda. The government wants absolute control over everyone, starting with kids in their early developmental years. And so what better way to do that than to put them on these mind-numbing pharmaceuticals, these mind-numbing drugs. So stick with us, folks. We'll dive into that when we get back. Take a short break. Stick with us. All right, folks. Welcome back to Truth Hertz Radio. Before I launch into our discussion for this morning, just want to mention my buddy Mike Anthony, herbalist friend of mine, has some incredible products. In fact, I need to be putting a commercial together here for him. I keep forgetting. I get so many things going on, to be run periodically throughout the week. But Mike Anthony, folks, has an incredible line of herbal products. My personal favorite, of course, was System Toner. It was literally a lifesaver for me. I busted my shoulder last year, and I was just in mortal pain. And as you might guess, the pharmaceuticals that they gave me, it's all I had available, so I was taking them, codeine or whatever the heck it was. But it didn't work. It didn't get rid of the pain. And all it did was just, give me a buzz, basically. But I felt every bit of the pain, and they constipated me. That's what those things do. I felt just horrible. The pain was excruciating. Anyway, I mentioned online a show I was doing at the time that this had happened, and Mike, one of my listeners, called in. He said, hey, give me your address after the show. I'm going to send you an email. In return, give me your address, and I'm going to send you something that's going to do wonders for you. And so the package came 2 days after the surgery, and I started taking them right away. And within 15 minutes after the first dose, the pain literally disappeared, and I mean disappeared. It was gone, absolutely gone. Another benefit of this product, Rapid Heal it's called, was, as its name implies, the fact that it did heal me very fast. I went back 2 weeks later, and the doctor was looking at the x-rays. He says, oh my, I don't believe it. He says, you're essentially healed already. He said, you're weeks and weeks ahead of where you should be. It works, folks. It really, really works. Rapid Heal is just mind-boggling. He's got another formula called System Toner, which does a really good job. It's something you take on a daily basis for like maintenance, where you don't have anything specifically wrong. You just want to make sure your system's functioning optimally, getting all the vital nutrients it needs. So that's something great for that. He's got a formula for arthritis, a formula for cancer. He's got another formula called Infection Killer. It's good if you have any internal or external infections, a cut, a bruise, or you got a cold or something. In fact, I had sniffles a few weeks ago. I took some of it, and unbelievable. Usually once I get the sniffles, that's how a cold starts. I woke up the next morning. My nose wasn't blocked anymore. I was fine. He's got herbal tea. He's got something called dragon juice. It's not really good tasting, but it's loaded with, essential vitamins, nutrients. It's just great stuff. So give him a call, folks. Mike Anthony, 845-231-1094. Again, that's 845-231-1094. Tell him I sent you. You won't be disappointed, especially with the Rapid Heal. I'm telling you, that stuff is phenomenal. Absolutely incredible. It's incredibly cheap, and it works, unlike pharmaceuticals, which will break the bank and not only don't work in most cases, but you'll wind up with other ailments you didn't have before you started taking the trash. Anyway. All right, guys, let's launch into the topic for today. By the way, if anybody wants to call in during the broadcast, the numbers to do that are 512-904-8014. Again, that's 512-904-8014. Or the toll-free number, use it sparingly. It does cost the network money when you use that. That's 866-841-1065, 866-841-1065. And as always, if anybody wants copies of the transcripts for this show or any other topic I've done, just email me at truthhertzradio@aol.com. Spell Hertz like megahertz, Hertz. Again, that's truthhertzradio@aol.com. I'll be happy to send you the transcripts. A lot of research goes into this stuff, and it's good to have this information on hand, if you ever want to share this with people to wake them up. And today's show is a good example. The ADD, ADHD fraud. This is an epidemic in this country, folks. So many kids are diagnosed with ADD, ADHD, and are thus put on Ritalin or some other psychotropic med. This stuff is ruining kids' lives. It's garbage. It doesn't work. The medication, it seems to work on the surface because, Johnny sits so quiet now. He sits in the corner, just drools on himself. Well, all you have to do is wipe his drool up every once in a while and change his diaper, and he's A-okay. So that convinces them that it works. Well, you could clock Johnny over the head if he's a little hyper and probably get the same results. Or you could just give Johnny a bottle of Johnny Walker and get the same results. It's ridiculous. To say that they're getting good results really doesn't say much about the pharmaceutical product, does it now? Again, when you can get the same results from some stiff bottle of liquor. Folks, it doesn't work, okay? It's poisoning your kids' minds. Ultimately, it might even kill them. It's ruining their kidneys, ruining your kids' liver. Gosh, I just can't believe how gullible parents are to fall for the chicanery of these pharmaceutical products. of these pharmaceutical companies, hungry for profit. Not to mention what it's doing to your kids' minds. Anyway, ADD and ADHD, folks, the main reason, once again, why so many kids are put on psychotropic medications today, were simply invented, not discovered. There is no such thing as ADD or ADHD. There's far more politics and economics involved in the origin of these diagnoses than anything medical. In fact, there is nothing medical involved at all. Some people actually believe that, you can see a physiological difference, an actual physical difference in the brain of a kid that's ADD, labeled ADD or ADHD, from a normal brain. You can do a you can do a CAT scan or something, and some abnormality will show up. That's not the case. It's not true at all. Kids who are labeled ADD, ADHD, even the most severe cases, have nothing visible, no visible difference at all in their brain's structure. This is a completely made-up diagnosis. Very often, all it is a kid is hyper probably from eating too much junk food, too much junk cereal. Get them off the junk food. Parents don't seem to want to do that today, though. That's too involving. It's so much easier to just put Johnny on the meds and have the same result, or what seems to be the same result, poisoning the kid's mind all the while. Very often, ADHD, again, is simply the result of too much junk food, folks. This is true not only because of the high sugar or high fructose corn syrup content in kid-oriented junk foods, which creates hyperactivity in many kids, but because of the additives that are put in these products. And I'll pick up there when we get back, folks. Stick with us. Short break. All right, guys. Welcome back to Truth Earth Radio. For the break, I was talking about kid-oriented junk foods and how, the sugar content primarily makes them hyper. Or maybe not primarily. I think there's other factors in there that are making them hyper, even more than the sugar. That certainly plays a big role. But a lot of the additives that are put into kid-oriented junk foods. In fact, the BBC reported on October 25th of 2002, quote, additives in popular snacks can cause hyperactivity and tantrums in young children, a study suggests. Research carried out by the independent watchdog, the Food Commission, found that so-called E-numbers, artificial food coloring such as tatrazine, E102, sunset yellow, E110, camoisine, E122, and Ponseu, 4R, E124, as well as the preservative sodium benzoate, E211, may adversely affect 1 in 4 toddlers. And interestingly enough, they're putting toddlers on medications today. Their brains aren't even developed yet, and they're putting these young kids on powerful psychotropic drugs. Lithium, a lot of kids are getting. As a behavior drug, lithium, that's what they put psychopaths on, in maximum security prisons, for crying out loud. It's unbelievable. People with severe bipolar disorder, they're giving young kids this stuff as a behavior modifier. I don't know, folks. I don't know. What sickens me more, the fact that this is being done to kids by unscrupulous profit and, power-hungry government officials and pharmaceutical companies and doctors, but the fact that parents allow this stuff to be done to their kids. But anyway, if you ask me, what looks like is going on here is that these pharmaceutical companies are deliberately, a lot of the same companies that make the psychotropic drugs like Ritalin are making these additives as well. It's pretty obvious what's going on here, folks. They're making a market for their drugs. They're creating hyperactivity, making kids hyper so that they can be put on their drugs and make big, big bucks. Something's not right here. Something definitely isn't right. And instead of parents saying, wait a minute, okay, Johnny's hyper, what can we do to stop the hyperactivity? other than drugs. That shouldn't be an option at all. But even if it is something that parents want to consider, you should try other methods first. Use the drugs as the last resort. But no, today drugs seem to be first resort. The easy way out. The quick fix generation, Hey, let's not make a nice, wholesome, healthy supper for Junior tonight. Let's just take him to McDonald's. Everybody wants what's easy, what's quick. It's pathetic. You're dealing with your kid's mind here. Can you really afford to play such games with your kid's mind? Unfortunately, many parents are answering that question in the affirmative. And there's a price to pay, a big price, not just the outrageous cost of the pharmaceutical products themselves, but down the line, long-term, folks, you're poisoning your kid's mind. I hope I don't even have to point this out. I'm sure most of my listeners know, but I got to mention this anyway. There's a high rate of suicide among young adults that have been on this medication for a time, particularly in the age range of 18 to 25. Specifically, in that age range, there's a very high rate of suicide among young adults that are on psychotropic medications, Ritalin and whatnot. I mean, do you really want to subject your kids to this stuff? These statistics, these facts are so well documented. There's no getting around it. There's no living in denial. There's no hiding your head in the sand. This is a serious problem. The problem in this country today is not ADD or ADHD. It's the medications that kids are put on because of these phony diagnoses. Unbelievable. Again, most of the time, the ADHD, the hyperactivity, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, simply stems from junk food. Get them off the junk food. Get them away from the TV set and the video games, and get them outside exercising. It is normal, folks, for kids to be hyperactive. Normal. That's a part of growing up. Kids naturally have a lot of energy anyway. That gets compounded when they're on, junk food, but kids are hyper anyway. That's not a disease that needs treatment. I think parents who think their kids have a disease that needs treatment when they're hyper themselves have the disease that needs treatment, maybe. Maybe the parents should be on the meds. Never mind the kids. It's unbelievable. Anyway, this tactic not only generates big profits, by putting additives in food that makes kids hyper, it not only generates big profits for pharmaceutical companies, but of course it creates a whole new generation of brain-dead citizens that are incapable of thinking clearly and thus are more easily controlled. That's the real agenda behind all of this, folks. It's not just the money factor. That's a little plus, a little added benefit, fringe benefit on the side. But the real agenda here is mind control. What we're seeing happening today with so many people on psychotropic meds, so-called antidepressants and whatnot, is all part of a long-range goal that the elites have had, that they have worked busily to research and develop, primarily through the CIA's MK-Ultra mind control program back in the 50s, 60s, 70s. A lot of these psychotropic drugs grew out of that program. I have a show at some time in the future I'll be doing on MK-Ultra, talking about how the sinister, unbelievably evil experiments that were going on involving even young children, 4, 5, 6 years old, and the horrific abuse that they were subjected to in the process of conducting these mind control experiments. But anyway, these drugs today, like Ritalin, are the direct outgrowth of the CIA's MK-Ultra mind control program. It has nothing to do with behavior control. That's what they tell you. And that does result from it, but the real goal is mind control. As far as ADD goes, which is the attention deficit disorder minus the hyperactivity, maybe this in many cases is simply due to the fact that children get completely bored in school. Did that ever dawn on parents? Johnny isn't paying attention and looking out the window because his teacher sucks. And he can't stand sitting there listening to this lethargic drone voice all day long. Get your kid out of that class. Get him another, another class with another teacher or in another school. Homeschool them. Ooh, imagine that, parents. Homeschool your kids. Get them the heck out of the government mind control program altogether. But in any case, ADD and ADHD, regardless what the real cause of these symptoms are, it's not a disease, folks, that requires pharmaceutical products. Do a little research. Yes, that's right. Do some work for your kids' sake. Don't let the pharmaceutical companies handle it for you, because they're going to kill your kid's brain and probably altogether kill your kids outright. It's just so much easier, though, isn't it? And, of course, so much more profitable to deal with this problem by putting kids on drugs rather than addressing the real issue, of course. That's all the medical establishment today, for the most part, certainly the pharmaceutical establishment, that's all it's interested in, is treating symptoms, not causes. They don't go to the root cause. And isn't it funny, the same psychiatrist who will tell you, oh, don't take to the bottle, it's not going to help you, your problems are only going to get worse, they'll turn around and tell you to take drugs. I mean, what's the difference? Ideologically speaking, you might as well pick up the bottle, because it's going to do the same for you that the drugs are going to do, and a heck of a lot cheaper, and not so bad for your health either, I might add. All right, guys, another short break. Stick with us. We'll be right back. All right, guys, welcome back to Truth Hurts Radio. Just wanted to mention, if anybody has been trying to call in over the past few weeks since I started here on Oracle, and you haven't been able to get through, just keep trying. I'm still not used to the ringtone that I get here when people call in. It's very subtle. Maybe I can see if they can change that so it blasts in my ear, but it's a very soft, doesn't even sound like a telephone ringing, so I really got to get used to it. There's been a couple times where I didn't even notice it ringing, and I got some emails, what's going on? How come you don't answer your phone? So, yeah, if you do try to call in, it doesn't answer, just keep trying. I'll eventually figure it out. And the number to do that, once again, is 512-904-8014. 512-904-8014. We also have the toll-free line if you're not able to call without a charge. Most people today, I think, can call nationwide without it costing, but if you're not one of those lucky ones, you can try the 800 number or the toll-free number, 866-841-1065. All right, guys, this is getting very interesting. This is probably my favorite part of this whole discussion here. This is unbelievable. In 1998, parents around the country were becoming concerned because so many kids were being diagnosed with ADD, ADHD, and thus being put on psychotropics that it, literally was becoming an epidemic. It is today. And a lot of them were getting concerned. Wait, what's going on here? Just a few years earlier, hardly any kid was diagnosed with it, and hardly any kid was on psychotropic meds, and just within a few short years, boom! I mean, it's the new fad now around the country. Millions and millions of kids are put on the stuff, and so parents wanted to know what exactly constitutes a diagnosis for ADD or ADHD. Why are kids? What scientific basis is there for these diagnoses? And so much pressure was being put on the National Institutes of Health in Washington that they impaneled a group to put parents' fears at rest. When one doctor on this panel, Mark Vonnegut, was asked to summarize what constitutes a diagnosis of ADHD specifically, in response, notice what he said. Let's see. Hold on here. Fixing my notes. Okay. Listen to this, folks. This is unbelievable. I took the transcript right off of the video. This is his words, word for word. I took this off myself, typed it in right from the video. He says, again, they just asked him, what constitutes a diagnosis of ADHD? He said, the panel has been frank, and the difficulties here are immense in terms of these, it is hard. It is very hard to know how to answer this question. They cannot, even when, they are as if driven by, there are some good clinical descriptions, and I think, I think part of the problem is the profession keeps changing the diagnosis. It took them all those oohs, ahs, and ums to finally come up with the answer. Well, the problem is the profession keeps changing the diagnosis. You have got to be kidding me. This was one of the top, if not the top, professionals in the whole country who deals with this issue all the time. They come to him to put parents' fears at rest, to finally lay out once and for all what exactly constitutes an ADD or ADHD diagnosis so they can know that it's totally scientifically based, and this is the best he could come up with. Part of the problem is the profession keeps changing the diagnosis because there is no such thing, folks. No physiological disorder known as ADD or ADHD. Again, most of the time it's simply hyperactivity in the case of ADHD or boredom in the case of ADD. And it doesn't require drugs to treat that so-called ailment. This conference that I just referenced later went on to admit that any brain abnormalities in an ADHD child are simply due to past exposure to medications. Imagine that. They admitted it. Whenever they do a CAT scan and see any type of brain abnormality in a child who's ADD or ADHD, that abnormality is due not to the ADD or ADHD. It is the result of drugs having been administered to treat the ADD or ADHD. So your kid goes to the doctor, the head doctor, without any problem physiologically with his brain. But months or years later down the line, after having gone to the doctor and being put on the medication, then the kid develops a problem with his brain. But that doesn't stop parents by the millions every year from still taking their kids to see the head doctor to get the head fix. Unbelievable, man. It's just unbelievable. Ha ha. Yeah. I thought taking a kid to a doctor was supposed to mean that that you wanted the kid to get better. Today, you take them to the doctor and they get worse. Kind of like banks, Banks used to be intended to protect your money from thieves, but today the banks are the thieves. If you want your money stolen, just open up an account. Unbelievable, man. I guess if people are suckers enough to fall for these scams, unfortunately, I have to say it, I guess they deserve to be scammed. The final conclusion of this same panel was this. At the very end of all of their meetings, all of their debates, this is what they concluded. Quote, "At this time, we do not have a diagnostic test for ADHD. Therefore, the validity of the disorder continues to be a problem." But in spite of this admission, 2 years later, by the year 2000, the number of kids diagnosed with this so-called disorder went from 4 to 6 million in the United States. Unbelievable. It rose a third. After they made that admission, well, there really isn't any basis to ADHD, and yet still the numbers rose. More kids were put on the drugs. It's just unbelievable. Most parents don't even know about this conference and the fiasco of it all, how they couldn't nail, lay out a scientific basis for their diagnosis. Here's some other interesting admissions along this line from professionals in the psychology and or psychiatry field. Psychology professor Diane McGinnis, Ph.D., had this to say, methodologically rigorous research indicates that ADHD and hyperactivity as syndromes simply do not exist. Neurologist Frank A. Bogman, medical doctor, had this to say, "We are not misdiagnosing or overdiagnosing, mistreating or overtreating ADHD. It has been a total 100% fraud throughout its 35-year history." Imagine that. We're not misdiagnosing or overdiagnosing. It's just a fraud, he said, period. Of course it is. Dreamt up by the pharmaceutical companies, and you can bet power-hungry El Governmente had its hand in this too. Associate Professor Robert Reed, Ph.D., University of Nebraska, had this to say: the causes of ADHD are simply not known. Yeah, wow. You can bet, folks, one of the main causes, as we've already mentioned, is the junk foods. Junk cereals and whatnot. There's a big cause of it right there. They're not going to tell you that, though. Psychiatrist Dennis Donovan, nationally renowned psychiatrist, quoted often in the journals. He said, ADD is a bogus diagnosis. Parents and teachers are rushing like lemmings to identify a pathology. Our current pathologizing of behavior leads to massive swelling of the ranks of the diseased, the dysfunctional, the disordered, and the disabled. And don't they love that? Oh, it's a big industry, folks. Big industry. Lots of money to be made. Again, it's not just, mind control. It's about profits. Or it's not just about profits. It's about mind control. It's both. Both. Physician William B. Carey of the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia said, what is now most often described as ADHD in the United States appears to be a set of normal behavioral variations. This discrepancy leaves the validity of the construct in doubt. Yeah, kids are naturally hyper, naturally bored in school, but nope, they found a way to make it a disease now to get your kids on dope. Stick with us, be right back, folks. All right, guys. Welcome back to Truth Hurts Radio. It's your host, Charles Giuliani, here to tell you that all you need to do is pop a few Prozac or Ritalin and just dream on. Just soar on through life in a comatose state and remain, as George Carlin said, smart enough to run the machines at work, but too stupid to figure out you're being screwed. Make life easier for the government to control you. Make life more comfortable for the pharmaceutical CEOs, so they can sit back at ease on their Caribbean yachts there as they suck huge profits out of you while poisoning your kids. Hey, now that's a real euphoric existence, isn't it? That's a real paradisical New World Order. Yes, that's what they've always wanted. Why not give it to them? Cooperate. Come on now, go along with it. Who cares if your life is a miserable existence as long as they're sitting cozy and comfy? I just can't believe that people buy into this stuff. As long as it comes stamped with the approval of some official organization, the American Psychiatric Society, then it must be okay. We can trust these guys. You just read, or I should say I just read, you just heard William Carey, a physician from the Children's Hospital in Philadelphia, state that what is often labeled as ADHD is simple normal behavior. Normal behavior. They found a way to make it a disease. Next thing they'll say, if your kid picks his nose, he's got boogophobia, or I mean, it's unbelievable. Or if it bothers you, you have boogophobia, and so now you need to be put on medication. What the heck? Don't put it past them. Nothing surprises me anymore in this George Orwellian world. It's unbelievable. People will buy anything. They just make this stuff up, literally. Call anything a disease they want just to get, just to get you on the dope. I love that term, chemical imbalance. Sometime I'm going to get Colin Ross on here, for those of you that are not familiar with him. He's a heretic psychiatrist from down in Texas. And he insists that the diagnosis of a chemical imbalance is a fraud. And it is, folks. It's a fraud. They invented it so they could convince you that you need chemicals in your system. I mean, it's common sense. If you're convinced that you have a chemical imbalance, what's the only way to correct that problem? Put chemicals in your system to balance out the imbalance. And what better way to do that but to knock on the door of your local pharmaceutical company and ask them what they have to fix the problem? What a scam. What a bunch of suckers that fall for this. Tunku Varadarajan, Wall Street Journal deputy editorial features editor, made this comment: "It's just as much nonsense on stilts as ADHD as it was pure poppycock as ADD." That was his summation. You know, even in the mainstream media on occasion, people are forced to admit this whole thing is just a complete fraud. Usually people, though, in the mainstream media who make such admissions are probably disgusted because they were victimized by this crap themselves. Psychiatrist Peter Breggin made this comment. This will be the last quote I'll read along this line. He said, "It is important for the Education Committee to understand that the ADD-ADHD diagnosis was developed specifically for the purpose of justifying the use of drugs to subdue the behaviors of children in the classroom." Well, now, what do you know about that? Isn't that an interesting admission? That's such a mind-blower, I have to read it again. Psychiatrist Peter Breggin stated, "It is important for the Education Committee to understand that the ADD-ADHD diagnosis was developed specifically for the purpose of justifying the use of drugs to subdue the behaviors of children in the classroom. They want to get them under control. Well, let's see. Legally, we can't administer 151 Bacardi rum to them, but we can all make it look good and tidy and even scientific and beneficial, or even necessary, if we can get them on medication. Just whatever it takes to get them under control so they can still continue to eat 15 bowls of junk food cereal every morning for breakfast before they come to school, and yet still remain lethargically quiet and well-behaved." Man, oh man, oh man. So there you have it, folks. There's a bold-faced admission right in your face. The whole thing was invented. ADD, ADHD diagnosis was all invented, made up, just to justify the use of drugs to subdue behaviors in the classroom. Yeah, this ranks up there with Paul Wolfowitz's admission to the Vanity Fair magazine in May of 2003 that the whole reason given for the war in Iraq of weapons of mass destruction was concocted for bureaucratic reasons, he said. It's something that we all could agree that the public would be able to accept this excuse, accept this reason for a legitimate excuse for the war, is something we all could agree on, he said. Admitting the whole thing was a fraud, they made up the WMD excuse, just like they made up the ADD, ADHD diagnosis. They do it all the time. They take you for a ride constantly. They make up these little fairy tales just to sucker you, so they can scam you and exploit you and take advantage of you. Unbelievable. And the American public as a whole falls for it every flippin' time. You know, how many times do they sucker us into wars? They're trying to sucker us into another one in Iran. They suckered us into Iraq, suckered us into Afghanistan. To this day, they've never presented evidence that Afghanistan had anything to do with 9/11. And boy, am I getting off the track here. But it's all connected. It's just more lies we've been fed. You know, most Americans don't realize Robert Mueller admitted in April of 2002, while speaking before the Commonwealth Club of California in San Francisco, that of all the tens of thousands of pages of documents that we have collected here in Afghanistan and abroad, we have not found a single line of evidence, a single shred of evidence to connect Afghanistan with 9/11. And yet, we're still there. Obama continues to send more troops over to Afghanistan to fight a war that we have no legitimate basis to be involved in the first place. But that's okay. They're just following suit, because that's been the case with every war we've been involved in. Every one of them, especially since World War II, none of which had the constitutionally required congressional declaration of war. It's unbelievable, folks. So why should we be surprised that they're scamming us to put our kids on psychotropic medications designed to simply control kids? And to make profits for the pharmaceutical companies? Why should that surprise us when they've been lying us into wars? If they can get away with lying you into a war, it's no surprise that they're going to get away with suckering you to get your kids put on poisonous, harmful, and often deadly medications. Just go right along with it, sheep. Yep, just do what you're told. Unbelievable. Parents who are compelled to put their children on Ritalin and other psychotropic meds, folks, are almost never told of the problems with the diagnosis of ADD or ADHD. And still even more of them are probably oblivious to the negative side effects, to the dangers of stimulant medications that are prescribed for ADD and or ADHD. The most common drug prescribed, of course, as I've been mentioning, for the so-called illness of ADHD is Ritalin, which is an amphetamine, folks, and is pharmacologically similar to cocaine, believe it or not. All this drug appears to do is make children docile and compliant. Docile and compliant. Ah, yes, isn't that exactly what George Orwell had talked about with his Soma? You know, other authors like him, Brave New World. Because of this, parents and teachers become convinced that the drug is effective in treating the disease of the child, simply because it makes the child docile and compliant. Well, as I said before, you can give them a stiff shot of whiskey, and they'll become docile and compliant too. Does that mean that whiskey is good? Beneficial? Do you see how people fall for this? Just because they get some results that seem to be beneficial or positive, they think the thing is working. Oh, it's great. Look at my kid. He's never sat so quiet before. Johnny, you want me to pour you 15 more bowls of junk cereal? You're sitting so quiet. Oh, look at that. He fell asleep. Oh, my God. Is he in a coma? Stick with us, folks. We'll be right back. All right, guys. Welcome back to Truth Earth Radio. Gee, I was talking about possibly discussing two topics today, but I should have known better. I get off rambling here, and I don't even know if I'm going to have time to finish all my notes for this topic. I'm not even a quarter of the way through my notes for this topic, and we're already halfway through the show. So obviously, I'll just be doing this one topic today. I hope I can finish this topic today, but as always, just request the transcripts if I don't, and even if I do, you might want to have these notes handy anyway. If you know some parents that have their kids on this dope, have them look at this stuff, folks. They need to be informed, of what they're doing to their kids. Let's look at some of the harmful side effects of Ritalin and other psychotropic drugs. Amphetamine, cardiac arrest. Well, that's no surprise, is it? Seeing that chemically it's essentially the same as cocaine. Cardiac arrest has resulted has been the result of, psychotropic use by many kids around the world. As I already mentioned, suicidal tendencies, especially in the age group between 18 and 25. There's been a lot of suicides as a direct result of taking psychotropic meds. Depression. Isn't that interesting? A lot of kids are put on these meds for depression, and yet one of the main symptoms or side effects, I should say, of a lot of these drugs is depression. Ritalin has also been linked with retardation of growth and development in many children. Slows growth, folks, retards growth and development, brain development as well as physical development of the child. The American Psychiatric Association, in its DSM, or Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, makes this admission. There is now a mountain of evidence that stimulants disrupt growth hormone production on a daily basis, and that they also reduce the child's overall growth, including height and weight. It is hard to imagine a more serious warning than growth inhibition, since it affects the overall growth of the body and all its organs, including the brain. Isn't that interesting? Parents think putting these kids on drugs is going to help the kid's brain. Their brain will function better when they're on the medication. And yet here we have an admission here by the Psychiatric Association itself that these drugs adversely affect brain development and indeed all the body's organs. Unbelievable, folks. Unbelievable. But that doesn't stop millions of parents around the country from putting their kids on, or allowing their kids to be put on, these drugs. Ritalin harms the brain by reducing blood flow disturbing glucose metabolism, and possibly causing permanent shrinkage or atrophy of the brain. Oh, yeah. Sign your kids up today. The negative brain effects of these drugs become even more serious when we consider the fact that many children under the age of 6, as I mentioned earlier, are now being put on these medications, an age when the brain isn't even fully developed yet. There's also what is called the zombie effect from these drugs, which is admitted by psychiatrists around the country. We'll get to that when we return from the break, folks. Stick with us. All right, guys. Welcome back to Truth Hurts Radio. I was talking before the break about the zombie effect that results from taking psychotropic medications. And let's hear what one psychiatrist, Peter Breggin, has to say. Did you ever see a kid strung out on Ritalin? Hey, what's happening, man? The same parents who, would freak if they ever found that their kid was smoking marijuana have no problem putting them on these drugs. What's the difference? Well, there is a difference. Pharmaceuticals are more expensive, and they'll kill your kid's brain even worse. Anyway, listen to what Peter Breggin has to say about the zombie effect. This drug-induced docile behavior is caused by chemically blunting or subduing the child's higher brain function. That part of the child's brain requiring creativity, freedom, play, energetic activity, consistent discipline, and inspiring educational activities will be blunted. Isn't that interesting? Gee, I thought they gave the drugs to these kids to enhance these areas. No, it thwarts them. Once again, psychotropic medications like Ritalin affect the child's brain such that it distorts or retards creativity, freedom, play, energetic activity, consistent discipline, and inspiring educational activities. And yet parents think that it's helping their kids' educational development. It upsets consistent discipline. Oh, this good behavior modification for you right there. Disrupts consistent discipline. And this is what they put them on. Oh, unbelievable, man. I will argue that these psychiatric medications were designed with these objectives in mind from the very beginning. Notice what the late British philosopher Bertrand Russell wrote back in 1953 in his book, The Impact of Science on Society. This is all according to plan. And this is exactly what he says here. Listen to this. It is to be expected that advances in psychology will give governments much more control over individual mentality than they now have. Education should aim at destroying free will, so that after pupils have left school, they shall be incapable throughout the rest of their lives of thinking or acting otherwise than as their schoolmaster would have wished. Students should be directed from a very early age to produce the sort of character and the sort of beliefs that the authorities consider desirable. Thus, serious criticism of the powers that be will become psychologically impossible. Do you see what's going on here? Your kids are being put on meds, folks, so that by the time they enter adult life, they'll be zombies. The zombie effect. That's exactly what they want, the zombie effect. They want them to do what they're told, not question authority, not even have the mental capacity to question authority, let alone to follow through with it. Bertrand Russell continues, I think the subject, which will be of most importance politically, is mass psychology. Although this science will be diligently studied, it will be rigidly confined to the governing class. The populace will not be allowed to know how its convictions were generated. When this technique has been perfected, every government that has been in charge of education for a generation will be able to control its subjects secretly without the use or the need of armies or policemen. Educational propaganda with government help could achieve these results in a generation. Well, here we are. We're in the Prozac and the Ritalin generation, just as he foretold. I marvel when people say, oh, you're a wacko conspiracy nut. Oh, yeah? How about if I can prove it, buddy? How about if I can give you sound, irrefutable documentation to prove that there is such a conspiracy going on, that they have been planning things like doping your kids up decades ago so they can control them? Let's look at what Aldous Huxley said, author of Brave New World, back in Brave New World Revisited, I should say. Back in 1959, he also wrote Brave New World, but he later wrote Brave New World Revisited. Listen to what he said. It seems to me perfectly in the cards that there will be within the next generation or so a pharmacological method of making people love their servitude and producing a kind of painless concentration camp for entire societies, so that people will in fact have their liberties taken away from them, but will rather enjoy it, because they will be distracted from any desire to rebel by propaganda, brainwashing, or brainwashing enhanced by pharmacological methods. Unbelievable. We're here now. We've already reached that point. People are having rights taken away, but rather enjoy it. They don't care because they've had their brains with pharmacological acts. As Huxley, did you see that they were looking for today? These two authors, Bertrand Russell, Aldous Huxley, they were globalists, folks, of a day when populations were called use of pharmacological products. Under the guise of treating some fictitious alleged psychosis, they're poisoning the public mind. They're dumbing you down, folks. Unbelievable. Ritalin and related drugs also sometimes lead to use of street drugs. For example, the International Narcotic Control Board of the UN, not that I care about the UN, but once in a while something good does squeak out of them, just like Congress. Congress sucks, but once in a while Congress will produce a decent report that actually leaks some truth out. Probably do that just so that you think there's some legitimacy to the whole thing. But anyway, this Narcotics Control Board has warned of the recreational abuse of methamphetamine, Ritalin, worldwide, and that psychostimulant use is connected with addictions to other drugs. In the April 1st, 2000 edition of the New York Times, for example, it was revealed that many people who attend Narcotics Anonymous, just like Alcoholics Anonymous, they have Narcotics Anonymous, who attend Narcotics Anonymous meetings have admitted that their drug abuse habit began by stealing Ritalin pills from their children's med supply and cutting up the pills to snort them. Once again, let me remind you, Ritalin is chemically similar to cocaine. The DEA has stated that, quote, a number of recent studies, drug abuse cases, and trends among adolescents from various sources indicate that methamphetamine use may be a risk factor for substance abuse. Using things like Ritalin can lead to other substance abuses. This is, the DEA admitting this, folks. Berkeley University ran a 26-year study involving 500 children, which found that Ritalin is basically a gateway drug to other drugs, particularly cocaine. Leading researcher Nadine Lambert told the Wall Street Journal that Ritalin makes the brain more susceptible to the addictive power of cocaine and and doubles the risk of abuse. Okay, folks, short break. Stick with us. We'll be right back. All right, folks. Welcome back to Truth Hurts Radio. If you want to treat your child's hyperactivity or inability to pay attention in class, here's a few tips that really will work, won't cost a lot of money, and won't destroy your kid's health and brain in the process. Simply monitor their diets a little more. Don't be so quick to take them out for McDonald's or give them the junk food cereals in the morning. Make them some oatmeal instead. make sure that they're getting plenty of exercise. And I don't mean the video games or the Wii. Get them outside, get them playing ball. Get them some family counseling, although you want to make sure that you're not going to have a doctor that wants to get them on medications as part of their treatment. Some respite care, or maybe you as parents yourselves want to get, some parenting classes or something. Educate yourself, on better ways. But again, make sure that the class is being taught by individuals that aren't locked in with pharmaceutical companies and aren't going to tell you that that's the only way to a healthy mind for your child, a healthy body. Maybe consult your local health food store. Sometimes they can put you in touch with, holistic doctors that aren't going to send you down that dead-end road. There are a lot of resources out there that can help you with things like this, ADD, ADHD. You can just go to you can just go to a health food store, and sometimes they can point you in the right direction. They can even recommend some formulas that can help, kids concentrate better, help the brain to perform well. In reality, not in the fantasy world that the pharmaceutical companies will give you. There's no drug out there, folks. No drug that will do this for you. It's all a facade. You get the illusion that these things are helping you. They're not. Drugs are poison. Let me stress once again, the body is not meant to assimilate chemicals. Chemicals are not natural. Chemicals are not meant for the body. They're poison. Okay? Plain and simple. For the same reason you tell your kid not to eat lead paint, you should be telling them not to take pharmaceuticals. They're harmful for the body. Sure, lead paint is more harmful, only because it'll wreck your kid's brain quicker than most pharmaceuticals, but harmful nonetheless. The idea is that we can take chemicals into our system because, they don't kill you right away. That's the whole reason why so many harmful additives are put in our food. Preservatives, artificial colorings, flavorings, it's all poison. But the idea is, in low dosages, it's okay. Well, that's just like saying, okay, don't let your kid eat that much lead paint. Let them eat just a little bit. Just a little dosages here and there. It's small dosages, so it's not harmful. Any poison is harmful. Do you understand? I mean, it's unbelievable that parents fall for this. Pharmaceutical products are chemicals. They're poisons. But again, because they come stamped with the approval of the establishment, the scientific community, this scientific community would have us believe that the Earth is warming up, and we got to hit the panic button. Man is, pollutions are ruining the ozone layer, on and on and on. It's all a bunch of hype. And boy, hasn't that hit the fan over the past couple of weeks. Nobody can deny it anymore. It's all hype. You don't think scientists lie? Of course they do. They'll lie as readily as anybody else, sometimes even more so, when their 6-7-figure incomes depend on it. You better believe they lie. They lie all the time. Just call the boys at NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. You'll see how much the scientific establishment lies. Can't believe some of the crap that they've written in that 10,000-plus page report, supposedly investigating why the Twin Towers collapsed. What a crockery. They actually make a statement in there. We found no evidence of explosives being used at Ground Zero. Well, of course they didn't, because by the time their investigation, so-called investigation, began in April of 2004, all of the debris at Ground Zero had been completely removed. But then they go on to admit later in a 2-page question and answer sheet that they released after, years after their report had been released, they admitted that they never tested any of the steel that they had examined for explosive residue. They state that they found no evidence of explosives being used, but then they admit, by the way, we never tested for explosive residue. That's like saying we didn't find Mr. Jones's fingerprints at the crime scene. Oh, by the way, we never tested the crime scene for fingerprints. This is the kind of crap they're pawning off on us as science. It's unbelievable. Anyway, coming back to our main discussion here. Oh, don't worry, we'll be talking about 9/11 a lot on this show. But It's one of my specialties. What a fraud. Well, let's get back to the ADD, ADHD fiasco. It's truly an epidemic, folks, in this country. Mostly in this country, because this is mostly where the big sales are for the pharmaceutical companies. They've got the whole thing all set up nice for especially through the education system. Our so-called public schools today are the main avenue through which kids are put on this dope, on these medications. Today, about 1/3, in fact, it's even higher than that now. These statistics are a few years old, but today over 1/3 of all kids in the United States are on either Ritalin or some other type of behavioral drug. The way that most kids are put on these meds is through the so-called public school system, as I said. Here is one of the most common ways that the trap is set to get kids on meds through this medium. One of the most common traps used today is hidden behind the mask of special education services. And here's essentially how it works. I can talk from personal experience. They tried to get my kids on the dope. Well, my son, anyway. They tried to get him on the dope years ago by claiming that he was, in need of special ed, and they wanted to get him on an IEP, an individualized education program. Once your kid is on an IEP, individualized education program, most parents don't read this because they don't read the fine print, but once they get your kid on this program, it's all over. For him and you. You must go along with everything they recommend. If you don't, they'll take your kid away, folks. Here's how it works. They'll come to you, and by the way, I need to stress this. It's not that your local public school is necessarily in on a conspiracy to destroy your kids and get them on meds. And no. They're put under tremendous pressure. And in fact, I need to mention this first before I even get into the dynamics of how the IEP thing works. The government puts tremendous pressure on public schools around the country by telling them, in essence, that if you don't have a certain percentage of your student body passing the standardized tests, and, this is being done on a state-by-state basis right now. Eventually, it's going to go national. They're going to have a national standardized test that each kid will get at the end of the school year. That's all part of Bush's No Child Left Behind Act. A fraud. Anyway, as part of the... Well, I can see we got a break coming up, so why don't I hold that thought, because this is kind of a long, detailed fiasco. But wait till you hear how this works, man. It's quite a trap that they've set, and unfortunately, schools around the whole country are falling for it. Stick with us, folks. We'll be right back. All right, folks. Welcome back to Truth Hurts Radio. So let's see now how this whole thing works. I don't want you to think that your local school district there, the teachers, the principal, whatever, that, they're out to get your kid on meds. That's not really their concern. What they're concerned about is losing federal funding. They've gotten these schools dependent on it so that they budget themselves around it. And this is how it works, folks. They do this with major colleges and universities. They started doing this decades ago, handing them these generous checks so that now they become dependent on it, so that, they don't want to do anything now to offend the federal government and risk losing that money that they become dependent on. So here's how it works. The government tells schools around the country that if a certain percentage of their student body fails the standardized test at the end of the year, they're going to cut off the federal funding. So now the pressure is on for the schools to get the kids to pass the tests. Do you see what fraud this whole thing is? These standardized tests have nothing to do with academic achievement, like they really care about your kids achieving academically. You suckers that fall for that. You are the dumbest of the dumb. But anyway, just think of it. We have, this country spends more on education than any country in the world. And yet we're last I checked, number 69 and dropping. It's probably lower than that now. This is a couple of years old, these statistics. But number 69 in the world in education. There's countries that have higher education standards than we do that we never even heard of. Unbelievable. But anyway, under the guise of ensuring that your child is developing properly, academically, they give them these phony flippin' tests. And by the way, one of the consequences that we're already seeing from these standardized tests, and you're going to see more of it as the years go on, is kids are wanting to drop out of school now more than ever. Because their attitude is, hey, why bust my butt to get good grades when I can still fail this phony test and none of it's worth it anyway? So why even bother? I can just get my GED. This is what they want, folks. They want cheap labor, have the kid graduate with his GED, and get out there and get a $4 or $5 an hour job. That's it. That's very much what... Or sign up for the military meat grinder. You know, there's no other opportunities out there because all the jobs have been sent over to China. So I'm going to join the military now and blow thinged up. I've been blowing thinged up on the TV anyway with my video game. Now I'm going to go over to Iraq and blow thinged up. I mean, it's unbelievable. What a scam. Look at what they're doing to your kids. And parents, those of you out there falling for this, you're rolling out the red carpet for them to destroy your kids' minds, their bodies, to send them over to fight these phony oil-grabbing wars that have nothing to do with national security or national interest whatsoever. Snap out of it. But let me get back to this. So here's what they do. They tell the schools a certain percentage are going to, if a certain percentage don't pass the standardized test, we're going to cut you off from federal funding. So now the school has the pressure on them. They don't want to lose the federal funding. So what do? They try to get as many kids as they can on special education programs, on individualized education programs. Get them on the IEP. Why? Because once on an IEP, your kid is guaranteed to pass the test. Because they can give them special concessions. They can grant them an unlimited amount of time. They can come back the next day. All they got to do is remember the questions they were having a hard time with, go home, look it up in the book, and come back, and presto, they get the answer right. The teacher can even give hints to the kid in the class while taking the test. Very revealing hints. They can almost essentially give them the answers. Do you get it? They want the kids on the IEP so that then they can make sure that they pass the standardized tests, and thus the school won't lose their federal funding. But now here comes the real clincher. Once they're on the IEP, the school loves it because the kids are guaranteed to pass the test, right? But once on the IEP, the parents have sold their kids over to El Governmente. Because listen to what the parents' brochure, or I should say the parents' rights brochure, has to say about getting their kids on an IEP. Once you have consented to an initial placement in a special education program, if you refuse to provide consent to any subsequent actions related to special education, the school district cannot use your refusal of consent as a basis to deny you or your child any other service, benefit, or activity to which you or your child may be entitled. Holy mother of Murphy! Did you catch that? My God, there's major smoking, major red flags going up here, folks. Did you catch that? How many parents don't even read this? But even more scary, how many parents do read this, but still have no problem signing this and giving their kids over to this system? It's stating that once you sign your kid up for an IEP, and don't worry, your local school district doesn't write this stuff up. This is all handed to them by Washington, or should I say by Wall Street via Washington. But please notice what this is saying. Once, they don't force you as yet to sign your kid over for an individualized education program. That'll come down the line next. But right now it's voluntary. But what they're telling you is, once you volunteer to have your kid receive special education services, any decision the school makes, any activity or any service that they want to provide your child or you as parents, if you refuse to comply, they don't have to recognize your refusal as a basis to deny your child the service or whatever that they want to give your kid or you. It even states that you as a parent now can be forced to receive. And then it goes on to say, oh yeah, you can pursue legal action if you want, but we know how that works. The old saying, can't fight City Hall. Yeah, you can try to fight them, but it's not going to get you anywhere. And you know what they're going to do? They're going to send in CPS and take your kid away. They're going to call it abuse because you're denying the service that we recommend to your child, most likely putting them on meds. Because that's where ultimately this all leads anyway. They want to get your kids on the meds. Once your kid is on an IEP and the school makes that recommendation, you can fight it, you can take it to court, but ultimately, folks, this is what happens in many cases. The Gestapo, CPS comes in and takes your kids away because you're not a fit parent. Unbelievable. So let me state once again, once you as a parent signs this contract, you no longer have the final word over what the school district, with direction from Washington, can impose upon your child or upon your own self for that matter. They can force you to take parental classes, take your kid away and say you're not getting it back unless you take these classes, blah, blah, blah. Do you not see how serious this is? This same contract further states, and I quote, after your child is first placed in a special education program, if a school district believes your refusal to consent to future recommendations would deny your child a free, appropriate public education, or FAPE, the school district must take steps to ensure that FAPE is provided. Such steps may include mediation and or initiation of a due process hearing to resolve the dispute. So you can pursue it legally, or they'll take you to court if you don't comply with their recommendations. And again, guess where this will ultimately lead? They'll take your kids away. You could even serve jail time. Who knows? Who knows? Force you to take medication yourself. And guess what? Even though it says that you can seek legal action, many parents who have done this have had their children taken away anyway by the child welfare agencies with the claim that their refusal to put their kids on meds amounts to abuse, denying their child what is in his or her best interest. Let's now look at a quote from an NEA report. That's the National Education Association, the most powerful teacher union in the country. Not only does it not operate in the interest of students, it doesn't operate in the interest of teachers either, even though it's a, quote, teachers union, the most powerful of them all. They have their own twisted agenda. In their brochure, their report, I should say, called Education for the 70s. Okay, keep in mind, this goes back decades ago. Listen to what this report states. Schools will become clinics whose purpose is to provide individualized psychosocial treatment for the student. Did you catch that? Individualized. Here we are. Beginning under Clinton's IDEA Act, Individuals with Disability Education Act, you have this IEP thing going on. Individualized education program. This is all the fulfillment of a long-term plan, folks. Stick with us. We'll talk more about this when we get back. All right, guys. Welcome back to Hertz Radio. We're in the last segment here. I got to read this quote. Don't miss this. This is the grand finale here. Again, this is the National Education Association's report, Education for the 70s, projecting ahead, into the decade of the 70s. And this is what they saw coming. And indeed, this is what came. It began in the 70s, and it whipped into high gear into the 80s and 90s, and now it's in full swing. Listen to what it said. Schools will become clinics whose purpose is to provide individualized psychosocial treatment for the student, and teachers must become psychosocial therapists. This will include biochemical and psychological mediation of learning, as drugs are introduced experimentally to improve in the learner such qualities as personality, concentration, and memory. Children are to become objects of experimentation. Now that's interesting, they're pawning off here the idea that this is a good thing. The medications are going to help with personality, concentration, and memory. But I just read to you some quotes where, from decades later up into more modern times, where psychiatrists are admitting that these medications they're giving kids are damaging their brains, ruining their concentration, ruining their memory, ruining their personalities, and causing the zombie syndrome, as they call it. Oh, yeah. Well, here we have it. The NEA was suckering you into thinking that this was going to be a good thing. But notice, though, the chilling admission. Children are to become objects of experimentation. They're using your kids as guinea pigs for their little experiment, to maximize their control, to see what's most effective in dumbing kids down so they can be maximally exploited in the workplace, on the battlefield, however El Governmente decides to use them. And all the while to convince you that in putting them on these drugs, it's going to help them learn better. And yet look at how our education standards drop exponentially every year. You really think they're out to help your kids learn better? How can it be that they continue to spend multiplied billions of dollars more every year on education, and yet the system continues to fail miserably? We continue to drop in international standards of education. How can that be? You can't be this incompetent, folks, by accident. Do you understand? This is destruction by design. They're using your billions and billions of tax dollars every year to see how more effectively they can screw up education, dumb your kids down, dope them up. This is all we're getting from our so-called education system today. Look at the statistics. Look at quotes like what I'm reading to see for yourself that this is all part of a long-term plan. What we're seeing played out here was, planned out a long time ago. And it's working, unfortunately, very effectively. Even though the NIH can come out and admit that, they don't really have any basis for the diagnosis of ADD and ADHD, that didn't stop the cases from, going up 1/3 over the next 2 years. It went from 4 million to 6 million kids being diagnosed with ADD and ADHD and being put on psychotropics. They can admit that the whole thing is a scam, essentially, and yet it doesn't stop it. Once the ball starts rolling, the American sheeple, dumbed down and doped up as they are, how can we expect parents, I guess, to realize the dangers of doping their kids up when most parents themselves are doped up? You got to get the parents off the medications first before they can realize the kids got to get off of it. Unbelievable. Again, these statistics are a couple of years old. I'm sure it's worse now, but as of 2 years ago, about 1/3 of all adults were on psychotropic medications. And you look at the side effects. I don't know about you folks, but start taking note of this. You'll be able to confirm what I'm saying. Almost everybody I have ever known who has been on medication exhibits about 80% of all the known symptoms that are negative symptoms that come from taking those medications, the negative side effects. You can just go to rx.com or whatever, and, they'll list the symptoms for whatever drug it is that the person is on. Look at the negative side effects, and then watch that person over the next, few days, weeks, whatever. You'll discover that the average person has about 70 to 80% of all of the known symptoms, or side effects, I should say. I knew a woman who was on Prozac. She was tired all the time, irritable, had mood swings, several physical symptoms too. I won't go into that, but all of the personality changes that were said to be side effects from the medication, they were there. Inability to express emotions properly, emotional swings. Oh my gosh, it just goes on and on and on. Well, I already talked about the zombie syndrome that many psychiatrists now admit. They have to admit it because it's very obvious. You can't deny it. Kids that are put on these psychotropic meds have what's called the zombie syndrome. And yet, you're supposed to believe that these medications are actually helping them? When is America going to snap out of this? I'm not saying that all medications are bad, scrap them all, never take any medication again. There are some instances, as bad as medications are, and they are all bad. Eventually, medications will kill you, folks. They'll shoot your kidneys and your liver. But there are some emergency situations where, there's nothing else available, or this is the only potent thing that's going to accomplish that one good thing for them. For example, antibiotics. Antibiotics are horrible. They're ruining a lot of people's immune systems. But there are some cases when they can save your life. If you're a senior who's got pneumonia or something, you need something that's going to zap that pneumonia immediately. Powerful drug that, you could die. Of course, in that case, antibiotics are very important and life-saving. But not every flippin' time you get a runny nose, especially when you're a young kid that has an already healthy functioning immune system. You don't put a kid on antibiotics. Good heavens. How do you think the human race has survived on this planet for so long without antibiotics? Let the kid go, suffer through the cold. It's a terrible thing to see a kid suffer through a cold, but wouldn't you rather have that and have it actually build up his immune system? Because that's what happens when a kid is allowed to have this cold run its course. It'll build up the kid's immune system even stronger. So the next time a cold virus comes along, or bacteria or whatever, the kid will be more resistant to it, might not even get it, or will be able to fight it off quicker. But you put him on the antibiotics, you're now compromising the kid's immune system. Why do you think so many kids are getting surgery and having, tubes put in their ears from ear infections? Because they've taken antibiotics so many times, they can't fight it off. They're susceptible every time to ear infections. It just gets worse and worse, and eventually, they got to get surgery. Let the kid fight off the thing on his own. As you get older in your senior years, your immune system naturally winds down, and you do need help. Although I would argue that you don't even have to resort, unless it's an absolute emergency case. There's herbs you can take that'll build up your immune system and help you fight off colds that you don't need to take medications for. But my point is, medication should be a last resort in an absolute emergency case. But no, they're the first resort today in totally non-emergency cases. It's just way out of control. But the pharmaceutical companies love that. And they'll keep pumping the propaganda out that you need pharmaceuticals. It's the only way to health. I mean, that's really the impression you get when you listen to most doctors. There's nothing else under the sun that works. Only pills. Only medications. Cha-ching! But again, let's not forget, it's not just the money factor, folks. It's the mind control factor. That's really what it's all about. And on a future show, I'll be talking about MK Ultra mind control, the mind control program of the CIA, and how a lot of these drugs did, in fact, directly grow out of that experimentation program. Very, very sinister. If you're not familiar with that, you need to become familiar with it. In fact, if you want to look at the transcripts, even before I air the show, if you're really, really interested in it, just ask for the transcript for that show, MK Ultra Mind Control Program, and I'll be happy to send that to you. But let me warn you, it's very upsetting. I quote some testimonies in there from former victims of that program, and it's not for the weak. Let me tell you, some of these adults describe how as kids they were sexually abused, in ways that, quite frankly, I don't even want to discuss over the air. It's just unbelievable. Unbelievable, the stuff that's gone on and continues to go on. Don't let your kids be guinea pigs, folks, for El Governmente's mind control program or for the pharmaceuticals' lust for profits. Get your kids off the drugs if they're on it. Don't let them get on it if they aren't already. Keep them off it, folks. It's trash. All right, that's it for this week. Have a great week, folks. Another important topic next week. In fact, hopefully, a very important guest next week if I can get him on. I got the contact info for him. Let's hope it works out. You're going to love this one. All right, have a great week. We'll see you next week. Take care.